So today we're sitting with Bill Malik, the Global Vice President of Infrastructure Strategies for Trend Micro, a multinational cybersecurity product company. Bill's 4-decade-long career in IT spans from OS developer, tester, and planner with IBM to CTO of an identity management vendor acquired by Sun Microsystems to his own consulting business where he provided information security, disaster recovery, identity management, and enterprise solution architecture services for major clients like Motorola, AIG, and Silver Lake Partners. He was a research director and manager at Gartner, has over 160 publications, and is a member of ISACA. Bill, welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Great. So today we're going to be talking about cybersecurity and the metaverse. But before we jump into that, briefly, how did you get started in cybersecurity?
Well, the IT field was always fascinating to me. I did some work on that during school. And then on graduation, my first full-time professional job was as a programmer. And my career has basically been driven by, where's the biggest problem that we've got? And while I was a developer, the biggest problem was the stability of the systems. And so I got into operating systems. And that eventually led me to work at IBM. And while I was at IBM, the biggest issue seemed to be, at that time, coordinating the build of the products. And so I got involved with the build and test group, just assembling the 3,000 plus parts that make up the OS. Well, after I left there and went to Gartner, the biggest problem seemed to be security. And so I came up with a pitch called enterprise-wide security, and I delivered that a lot. And eventually, the leadership at Gartner said, "You will be the manager of the security service." And I said, well, I can think of a couple people better, but eventually I did, and pretty much stayed close to that ever since. But it's a fascinating area. I tell people I've been in IT a long time. There has not been a week that's gone by that I haven't learned something new in the information security space. It's an endless fount of fascination and things to learn and do.
Absolutely. And so, bringing it back to the metaverse, which might be one of the newest things that's kind of upcoming. If you think back, when it comes to information security, have the concerns and strategies changed much since you started? From documents, now to the metaverse?
Well, every year or two, we seem to come up with a new way to wreck the security structure that we've made almost good enough, right? We got almost good enough at standalone mainframes, and then they started networking. We got almost good enough at networked mainframes, and then we introduced PCs. We got almost good enough at that, and you know the story. Well, the last few years have seen an explosion in social media types, which have brought a couple of problems, one of which is the trustworthiness and reliability of the information. Another one of which is the ease with which those platforms grant bad actors access to individuals and corporations. The metaverse just sort of amps that up a bit more. And so I believe there are legitimate reasons for concern about how things will go in the metaverse.
So if we go a bit deeper in terms of, the ways of securing information, how that's changed, are there any specifics that would be easily explainable or that you'd be able to explain to us? Ways of securing it, maybe the types of concerns, that sort of thing.
Well, the first problem is, how do you prove you are who you say you are when you're talking to a computer, right? Now, the typical answer is, well, it's got to be something you know, something you have, or something you are. Or if you're of a certain age, something you forgot, something you lost, or something you used to look like. Uh, the fact is, establishing identity is really tough. There was a case just last week about a fellow who had managed to convince his peers that he was, in fact, an AI-generated avatar online. And it was very tough to figure out if that were true or not. A colleague of mine at Trend came up with a series called Project 2030, which looked forward at a world where immersive holographic experiences allowed us to, well, in one case, have conversations with people who had passed on in real life. because we'd captured enough information about them that we could reconstruct how they might participate in a conversation. That trope was used in a science fiction movie a couple of years ago as well. So, yes, how do you secure that stuff? Well, from a criminal's point of view, right? You have somebody, a buyer, put in commercial terms, who's got money and some kind of a need for a product or service. You've got a seller who has intellectual property and a product or service that might meet the buyer's need. And then you have an electronic platform connecting the two. Now, if you're a bad actor, you're going to say, well, I want to get this guy's money. I want to figure out what it is they want, and maybe I can, slip them a fast one and sell them something that's almost good enough, but not really. You look at the seller and say, well, maybe I can steal their IP, or maybe I can, taint their product. And then you look at the channel and say, well, maybe I can intercept the traffic and, change a message, sow distrust. Well, what's the motivation for that? I think the typical motivation that the three-letter agencies use is the acronym MICE. It's money, it's ideology, it's coercion, or it's ego. So for some reason or another, a person is going to go in there and try to damage stuff. Now, it used to be that the crimes that we'd hear about were nuisances and annoyances. Somebody would hack a server to put their logo on it. Hooray, I conquered this mountain. But then it became more focused on money. Once upon a time, ransomware was just, spray and pray. They deliver it everywhere. And if they got, grandma's photos of the kids, they'd encrypt them and she'd have to shell out 100 to get access to them again. Well, that kind of high volume, low margin stuff isn't very fun. So the bad actors got smarter and started going after targeted events. And so you had business email compromise, or the contemporary versions of ransomware. And the newest twist is, of course, political actors, agitprop, that kind of stuff. Now, here's where this comes to the metaverse. The more you know about somebody, the easier you can sell them something or you can mislead them. In order to operate in the metaverse, I have to have not only a very rich, real life-like experience, but the technology that's providing me that experience has to be constantly aware of what I'm doing, what my reactions are, and so on. Which means that as I am playing, Gris, I will be constantly monitored in that environment. Here's the problem. We know from studies going back 50 years or more that people actually perceive stuff before it rises to the level of consciousness. Uh, you can take a one frame image of something scary and tuck it into a horror film, and that 1/30th of a second image will cause people to feel unease, making the horror film even scarier, even though they don't know exactly what it is. Well, so how does that play out in a metaverse environment? I'm playing the game of Gris. I'm teaching this woman how to generate music so she can get her colors back. And every once in a while, an image flashes up, and it's an image, say, of a sheep. And when I see the image of the sheep, again, not consciously, below the level of perception, my micro expression goes, "Aw, that's cute." And then the advertiser or the political action committee or whomever is running this thing says, he has an attraction to sheep. And then they put up an image of a cow, and I go, ew. Not again consciously, but they now know that I'm attracted to sheep and I dislike cattle. So what does that mean? It means when I'm looking at a video of a debate between two political candidates, while I'm looking at candidate A, if somebody could stream an image of a sheep in just for the briefest second, I'll go, "Oh, she seems like a nice person." And while candidate B is speaking, they sneak in an image of a cow. It's like, he's creepy, right? So I am potentially being manipulated by stuff that I can't even see.
That's incredible. That kind of bad actor that runs much deeper than I would have expected. What the metaverse could bring in terms of manipulation and influence. Wasn't even thinking about that direction. That's very eye opening. Um, if you imagine the metaverse, and kind of what the end vision of what a metaverse would look like, when it's fully realized and everybody can use it, what do you think that might look like? And then, I mean, you've touched on a lot of these possible threats and issues that can arise, but what other types of threats do you think would be possible in that fully realized metaverse?
Well, the nice thing about this conversation is we get to talk about what the future might look like. And for me, when I think about the metaverse, the reason Facebook had to use that name was because in 1992, Paramount trademarked the name holodeck, right? Because that's what the full function metaverse would be. I mean, it's not only visual and acoustic, but there are, aromas and feelings and textures, you can be sipping a drink on a porch in Riza, right? Well, if you look at the uses of the holodeck in, the Star Trek genre, what things can go wrong, oh my, bad guys have taken off the safety protocols, right? Or Captain, we can't recover control, a powerful intelligence is guiding this, or uh, was it has taken over this thing and they're now using it as a way to enslave, holographic semi beings. Well, that dystopian world, the neat thing about Star Trek is that, the intrepid crew always pulls through at the end. But here we are about to enable something like the holodeck, and we don't even know what the safety protocols are. And the people that are putting it up there are not doing it for the betterments of society or even, the entertainment of the participants. We are there as potential consumers. And the people that are putting it in place have already shown their ability to make billions of dollars by gauging what our desires are, what our fears are, what our secret shame and guilt is, in order to drive us to buy more soap or to vote for this candidate rather than that one. So putting it together, the end game, um, it would be nice if it were something like a Star Trek universe. But having large commercial interests, again, if you're not the one paying for it, then you're the product. And changing that is going to require substantial rethinking of what it is we're using the internet for.
Right. If we think about the technology as well, to get to something like a holodeck, we're going to have to potentially go through the phases of something more akin to a Blade Runner dystopian Ready Player One bodysuit
Yep.
uh, type of scenario. Um, there's already kind of augmented reality machinery in kind of industrial Internet of Things types technology and machinery that's being used.
Sure.
If we talk about it closer to our present and kind of the steps before we get to something fully detached like a holodeck, um, what kind of real examples do you think we could anticipate, and how they could be uh, uh, the threats to them, how they could be breached?
Well, I did a presentation about a year and a half ago on digital transformation, and the use of augmented reality played heavily into that vision. So, one scenario is the farmer who puts on his AR glasses and takes a look at his field, and the glasses tell him, these crops in this area seem to have an infestation of so and so. You need to apply this pesticide. Uh, this area seems to be getting a little less rainfall than necessary. You might need to increase your irrigation parameters here. Um, these guys are coming in early. You probably want to check your equipment for harvest. Now, the thing that digital transformation does and what the metaverse will hopefully allow us to do is to have that information about, what's the health of the crops. Well, hopefully you'd have a connection with a firm that knows how to make pesticides safely. And they're the ones giving you the analytical data. Hopefully, the information about rainfall comes from, again, a trusted source, maybe a national meteorological group. And the stuff about harvest and machinery might come from, a vendor whose trucks and harvesting gear you use. Um, and the thing here is, it all comes out on one platform because of agreement on APIs, and the farmer decides what it is he's going to see. Now, how can a bad actor mess with that? You can put the wrong pesticide on the crop and it goes down the drain. Stuff like that. Or waste motion, bad action. Similar scenarios apply to, say, the maintenance of heavy equipment. The technician comes in, puts on the VR glasses, takes a look at the pump, and up come the specs here. And there's a list of the most common faults. And over here is a box to click if you want a 5-minute tutorial on how to change the gasket. And this person becomes an expert. Well, they've done it before, but never with this particular machine of this vintage. So they become an expert right here and now at solving that. So there are tremendous potentials for improved productivity, greater job satisfaction. I now really know what I'm doing. Um, Smart cities make use of this in order to make the lives of residents and visitors, shoppers, um, workers, to make their lives easier, to be able to get emergency services on site quickly for whatever kind of problem, to route people around construction if we need to fix a main on this particular street and so on. So, yeah, there are significant upside potential, but every one of those opens a door for a bad actor to say, trouble ahead. One of the jobs I had as an independent was doing an audit for a Department of Transportation for one of the northern states. And I found that their annunciator boards, the things, the signs on the side of the road, at that time, that information was nothing more than a text message. And the security was that nobody knew the phone number. It's like, what? This is 2000 and something. You guys heard of war dialing, haven't you? So anyway, they fixed that up. But you're driving along and you see a sign that says, happy birthday, Snookums, your honey bear, or a sign that says, explosion and fire at nuclear point, Indian Point nuclear reactor, Tappan Zee closed. Um, Again, it's societal disruption. It's losing faith in the integrity of our infrastructure. It's raising the level of adrenaline. People who are worried don't think deeply about things. So it's a set of vulnerabilities. Now, in order to make something like the metaverse work, we have to have something like a lot of sensors, a lot of analytical engines, and a lot of actuators. And all of those things are IoT devices, which use peculiar proprietary protocols, right? I mean, Modbus was invented the same year that ARPANET went live in 1969. It was 30 years later that Modbus began using TCP/IP. I think it's port 502, but check me on that. The point is that the convergence between OT and IT, I don't think will happen. I'm never going to file my taxes on an industrial robot, and I'm not going to use my PC to drive my car. But there will be greater information going back and forth. My car will tell me about the its state by giving me something on an app. So as we introduce more flavors of technology, especially from the industrial IoT world and the IoT world into our IT networks, we dramatically increase the attack surface. So it's a poser, it's a challenge, it's a hard problem. It's not a complex problem. It's just a hard problem. We need to make a long list and check them off one at a time.
Absolutely. And the one that I always hear about, because it's the closest, I think, to us right now, is the bodysuit, right? Like if you're wearing a tactile bodysuit that gives you that tactile sensation, move around, you don't want that to get hacked, right? You don't. And what kind of biometrics is that kind of suit going to collect?
Yeah.
And who gets that? Gets those biometrics, and how can those biometrics be exploited? So yeah, I mean that's a fair. That makes sense. That's very daunting. Not to scare people too much away from what the metaverse can bring. Hey everyone, join us for part 2 of the Cybersecurity and the Metaverse series, where Bill elaborates on the inevitable darkverse and how we might address it. See you there.